Hi, it's Dr. Gold, and I thought what it would be useful for chapter 13, which starts to get into, different ways of valuing stocks, to help you to make determinations on how best to make those investments in the stock market. I thought it would be useful to go to Yahoo Finance. The way you get to Yahoo Finance is by clicking or by typing into a browser finance.yahoo.com. It's a really useful site. It has a lot of good information here. Up at the top, you can see, the more common stock market indices that have been discussed in the textbook, like the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the NASDAQ over-the-counter market, and S&P 500. Underneath that, you can see some information about some commodity prices, gold and crude oil prices, $52 a barrel for that. And then the dollar here versus the euro. You don't really need to understand too much what 1.20 means, but needless to say that 1 euro gets you $1.20. You might think, well, gosh, that's very strong. The euro, is much stronger than the dollar, and it is. But if you look at a chart of the euro, let's say over the past, 3 months or so, you can see here that the value of the euro has declined, which, again, not all that important from our perspective here. What I wanted to show you, though, is this site not only has this general information that's updated in real time each and every day, but also as you scroll down, a whole bunch of news, top news, business briefs, and personal finance related news, and then other news about a myriad of different topics here. As far as looking into some of the numbers and formulas that are in the textbook in chapter 13, if you click over here where it says quote lookup and you just want to investigate one of the companies you might be interested in, let's just pick Starbucks. Once you start to type in Starbucks, it finds underneath the ticker symbol SBUX for Starbucks. And you click on that, and it gives you a whole bunch of information about Starbucks Corporation. First of all, the stock last traded at $81.55 on January 2nd. I'm recording this on January 4th, 2015, which is a Sunday, so the stock market's not open. But anyways, it closed there at $81.44, and it was down 61 cents for the day. It also shows you just on this first screen here a couple of terms that were sort of used in the textbook. One is earnings per share, and you can see here that Starbucks has $2.71 earnings per share. That means that the company, if you took their total profit, their earnings, and divided it by the number, divided into the number of shares, you'd get $2.71 per share. Another unit of measurement that was used in the textbook is something called the price earnings multiple. This is at how many times is Starbucks stock trading at relative to its earnings. So it's selling at 30 times its earnings of $2.71. And these numbers sometimes aren't exact, but if we open up a calculator, we should get a similar number. So if we take the share price of $81.44 and we divide it by the earnings per share of $2.71, we get 30.05, which it says here for the PE ratio. So that's how that's calculated. It's the stock price divided by the earnings per share. Another thing that's talked about in the textbook is dividends. You can see here the dividend dollar amount and what's referred to as the dividend yield of 1.5%. Dividends are a share of the profits that some companies pay, not all companies. This one happens to pay a dividend, Starbucks, of $1.28 per year. So again, if you take $81.44, if you take $1.28, which is the dividend amount, and you divide that into the share price of $81.44, you get a 1.5% dividend yield. So that's how that's calculated. The dividend yield will change throughout the day as the stock price changes. So for example, if all of a sudden Starbucks stock next week went from $81 down to $70, well, the dividend yield would go up. How do we know that? Well, we know that just intuitively because $1.28 would be a larger percentage of $70 than of $81, but we could calculate it by taking $1.28 and making believe that the stock had gone down to $70, and you get a dividend yield of 1.82%, which is higher than 1.5%. Also on this website is the chart of the company here. And you can look at charts from different time periods. Here's a chart of Starbucks over the past 2 years. You can look at a chart of Starbucks over one day just by simply toggling along the front here. If you want to look at a 3-month chart of Starbucks, there's the stock price. It looks like it's been doing very well. And then the other thing this website does is on the left-hand side, there's a whole menu of different information sources that you can access. So I'm going to go to key statistics here. Let's hop into key statistics. And in the key statistics, you'll see a lot of information about the company, including the company's profit margin here, including the company's total revenues, which is the total dollar amount of coffee and other stuff that Starbucks sells. So they sell like $16.5 billion worth of stuff every year. It tells you how much their revenues are growing. So their revenues are growing still at 21% a year. It gives you 3-month revenue growth numbers. And as you scroll down into the balance sheet information, you get things like a current ratio, book value per share, and a whole host of other information about the company. It also gives you here on the right-hand side the number of shares outstanding. The number of shares outstanding is important because it's good to know that when calculating different ratios and analyzing different companies. Now, another thing we can do is if we look at Starbucks again and we go back to their page, and you're saying, well, gosh, those numbers, their price earnings ratio, their dividend yield, their revenue growth numbers, it just really, doesn't mean all that much to me because those are just numbers for Starbucks itself. How does Starbucks compare with its competitors? Well, you can simply just go to this page here for Starbucks, and you'll see as you scroll down a listing for competitors over here on the left-hand side. So let's click on that and see who is considered to be Starbucks competitors. Well, one competitor is, of course, Dunkin' Donuts. And if you're not sure what DNKN is and MCD, if you look at the bottom here, it gives you a key and it shows you what those symbols represent. So here, this gives us more perspective. We can see that Starbucks generates or has a market capitalization, which is the share price times the number of shares, of $60 billion. And that's sometimes viewed as the value of a company's stock. So it's slightly smaller than McDonald's, which has a $90 billion market capitalization. But both McDonald's and Starbucks are significantly smaller than Nestle, which has a market capitalization of $230 billion. As we scroll down this list, we see that Starbucks is leading the way in terms of its price earnings multiple. So it's able to demand the greatest premium in terms of its stock price to its earnings per share. Now, the reason for that is as you look at the rate of growth for the company's revenues, you'll see here that Starbucks revenues are growing the fastest at 10% every 3 months, or roughly, on average, 20 to 40% per year. This is more than Dunkin' Donuts, whose revenues are growing at 3%, McDonald's, whose revenues recently have started to not grow, and Nestle's, whose revenues have not grown recently. So this is why Starbucks is able to command a higher price earnings multiple as compared to these other companies, because it's growing at a faster rate. The other thing you can look at is if you go to the profile for Starbucks, it gives you some information, interesting information about the company. It tells you obviously where they're located, tells you how many full-time employees they have. It'll tell you what industry sector they're considered to be part of. And as you scroll down here, some of the information that publicly traded companies have to disclose are the wages paid to the top executives. So here you can see Howard Schultz, who is the founder, chairman, and chief executive officer, who makes $3.96 million a year. And then the other executives listed there and their wages in accordance with that. You can also see here, you can get more information on Starbucks by simply clicking on that. It gives you news about Starbucks. You can go back. You can go to the Starbucks homepage. When you go to the Starbucks homepage, here there's a lot of information about their products and everything, but also, Starbucks is a very socially responsible company, so you can see all this information here about all of the socially responsible initiatives that they have underway around the world. So the Yahoo Finance site, which is really just one site out of many that we can look at, has lots of information available for free. It allows you to compare and contrast different companies, allows you to access financial statements for all of these companies. It's absolutely amazing the abundance of information that's available. So I encourage all of you to compare and contrast companies using the Yahoo Finance website. And one of the interesting things you can do is if you go back to the summary for Starbucks and you say, I want to compare Starbucks stock price with the stock market overall. Like, has Starbucks or the stock market done better? So if you click on comparison, you can choose, let's say, the S&P 500. And you can see here the red line is the S&P 500. The blue line is Starbucks. And over the past 2 to 3 years, Starbucks has consistently been outperforming, except for a short period there, the market overall. And that's always a good indication of, how well or how poorly a company is doing. So that's just a quick overview of Yahoo Finance and how you can use it to get information about companies and competitors and sort of apply some of the information from the textbook to real world practice in terms of making investment decisions of your own.